Hey guys, welcome back to Clownfish TV. This is Kneon, and we are going to talk about Square Enix taking a massive hit to their bottom line. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine Square Enix, the company that once gave us the Summer of Adventure in 2000? Actually, I think in 2000 they had a lot of amazing JRPGs. Back then, they used to put out fantastic games like every other month, and a lot of them were unique IP. Now, Square Enix just regurgitates the most popular Final Fantasy titles again and again and again. They make shitty mobile apps, and they make games like Forspoken. They don't know what they are, right? And now they're paying for it. Apparently, Square Enix is going to report a loss of 22.1 billion yen, $140 million US. And this is after they dropped the Final Fantasy VII remake, rebirth, whatever you want to call it. I don't even know what to say. I mean, this used to be one of my favorite companies, but that was Squaresoft, not Square Enix. Squaresoft, back in the day, was firing on all cylinders, and even Kotaku, of all places, mentioned it, that in one summer we had games like Threads of Fate, which is amazing, Legend of Mana, again, another amazing game, Chrono Cross, amazing. Later that year, I think we had Final Fantasy IX, and I think Vagrant Story came out either earlier in the year, or it came out like late 1999. And I remember that. It was awesome. It was, all these really great games coming out. We had Parasite Eve, and we had Front Mission, and To Ball Number One even. I mean, they had some weird stuff, but it was like they were making really awesome games. They were trying new things, and they're just not doing very well now. So let's talk about this before we get into it any further. Please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants, guys. Niche gamer, Square Enix to report extraordinary $22.1 billion yen loss, canceling games and more selective pipeline. So what's going to get canceled? Forspoken 2? According to Niche Gamer, Square Enix has posted a report that they're expecting to claim an extraordinary loss in their latest fiscal year ending in March 2024. Roughly $140 million US dollars. The new financial report notes the company will recognize extraordinary losses and content abandonment losses due to a revised policy on development of HD games. Meanwhile, indie developers are putting out games that don't cost nearly as much as the crap that Square Enix has been putting out, and they're doing very well. I would love for Square Enix to come out with a PS1 style Final Fantasy game. Just like a throwback. Get the Gooch on board, right? Just give us like a throwback to that. Gamers would be thrilled. I mean, obviously, we don't have an aversion to older games because you keep repackaging them and re-releasing them over and over and over again, right? So, whatever. Furthermore, the company said the new policy change has the intention of being more selective and focused in the allocation of development resources. While it's not outright stated, the above notes are PR speak for what is several games being canceled, as the policy change led to Square Enix losing $140 million US. Nature of the losses. Here's the full message from Square. At the meeting convened on March 27th, the board of directors of Square Enix Holdings voted in light of the myriad changes underway in the environment surrounding its group to revise the group's approach to the development of high-definition games with the intention of being more selective and focused in the allocation of development resources. As a result of a close examination of the group's development pipeline undertaken in keeping with this revised approach, the company expects a 22 billion yen loss. The company is carefully reviewing its consolidated forecast for the fiscal year to assess the potential for impact from the above or other factors. So let's talk about the other factors here. This has been going on for years. Square has been losing money for years. It got so bad that they had to sell off Tomb Raider, Deus Ex, Eidos, and Crystal Dynamics. And now we know what's happening with Tomb Raider. They're nerfing Lara Croft. But they keep selling off these once evergreen IP, and they canceled the sequel or another Deus Ex game, as I understand it. Tomb Raider is like dead on arrival at this point, and we saw what the tabletop game is. And they sold them to, I think, Embracer Group. Was that who bought them? And then Embracer Group is collapsing. But one of the biggest money losers, my understanding, was Forspoken. Again, this is a very Western game. I think Square needs to stick to being Square. Stellar Blade is something I would have expected from Square 25 years ago, 30 years ago, with more RPG elements. But that is more in line with what I would have expected Square. Square doesn't know what it is. It's just become another AAA developer, and they're trying to milk their past successes, Final Fantasy Remake and Rebirth and Rebirth. And I remember we used to get new Final Fantasy games, like totally new Final Fantasy games, every 2 or 3 years. And each Final Fantasy game was different from the last Final Fantasy game. And now they just keep re-releasing the same old games. It takes them 10 years in some cases to put out a proper sequel to Final Fantasy. And what people don't realize is like Final Fantasy 15, that was not supposed to be a standalone Final Fantasy game. Final Fantasy 15 was actually a spin-off of Final Fantasy 13 that languished in development hell for like a decade. And they're like, well, what the hell? Let's just call it Final Fantasy 15. And that's what they did. 16 is an action game. I mean, it's not terrible, but again, it's not what I would think of for Final Fantasy. And then they just keep going back to the MMORPGs and all that. But I'm like, they have lost the plot. This is last year. Forspoken reportedly cost $100 million to make. Players are baffled. The LinkedIn account of the game's lead writer, Allison Reimer, describes Forspoken as a fantasy AAA video game. That means $100 million plus budget. The discovery of Reimer's comments comes a few days after Square Enix said the game's sales have been lackluster and that its financial failings posed a considerable risk to the parent company. This was last year. So here we are a year later, and the company is not in any better position than it was last year. Just do what you do best. Make AA games, make 2D, make more, Octopath Traveler, whatever. Make more 2D sprite-based games. Give players what they want. Again, I would not be averse to a Final Fantasy game or another JRPG, maybe a brand new series that was just a notch above PS1 or PS2 graphics, as long as the game was good, as long as the plot was good. We're not really, gamers aren't really asking for a whole lot. We just want good games again. And here's the thing, like so many of the new games have been trashed that I'd rather go back and play, Final Fantasy 9 again or something than play a lot of the new stuff. But yeah, the sales were lackluster for Forspoken. It's thought that this game's underperformance led closely to the reabsorption of its developer Luminous back into Square Enix, may have contributed to the departure of the publisher's president. The $100 million figure was met with shock on Twitter, with one user suggesting they must have accidentally added a zero. There's no way that game had a $100 million budget. Again, this goes back to the conversation we're having about AAA games. There's a lot of bloat. There's a hell of a lot of bloat on these games, and a lot of it comes from unnecessary staff, unnecessary expenses. You want to start getting into, I guess, the DEI angle of it, but we have a lot of people that really aren't contributing to the development of the game. I worked in marketing for years. I worked for a software developer, and like 10% of the staff did the majority of the work at the one developer I worked at. Like everybody else was just kind of like fluff. Like, why are you here? I mean, they had to be there for a reason, I think, like legally in some cases, but I'm like, you're not actually making anything. You don't need to be here. And the Square of, days yore, the old Square, the original Squaresoft. The reason Final Fantasy was called Final Fantasy is they thought they were going to go out of business. It was a skeleton crew. They thought it was their last game they were going to make. And here we are, but it's like you've learned nothing. You've learned nothing. Plenty of responses were struggling to see where all the money would have gone because Forspoken's reviews didn't speak to a game of that kind of quality. While we don't often see the financial Curtain pulled back on AAA projects. We did with Spider-Man. It was like a $300 million game. It's likely hoped that the 9-figure price tag would result in a Metacritic score of more than 64. And this was last year. This is before Suicide Squad. This is before Starfield, I think, came out. It doesn't matter how much time and how much money you throw at a game. Sometimes it's just not good. It's not what players want. Forspoken definitely hurt them. And again, it's terrible to see this when Square was like one of the few sure bets that we had in gaming. Like Square Enix, even a misfire from Square Enix, or not Square Enix, rather Squaresoft. I need to make the distinction. Enix and Squaresoft, they merged after they Icarus themselves, which tends to be a thing that they do, when they did the Final Fantasy movie, right? Spirits Within. And they almost destroyed the company and they had to merge with Enix to survive. But Squaresoft used to take all kinds of chances. They put out consistently good product, and even their misfires were like maybe a 6 or a 7. You didn't get like 1s and 2s and 3s from Squaresoft. It was like even their shit was better than what other developers were putting out. Consistently good quality. And this is where we're at. And lots of diversity, lots of different kinds of games. And they were the best at JRPGs. And now you're lucky if you get one every 10 years. You know, you get a new JRPG every 10 years. It's tragic. This comes from IGN. Final Fantasy maker Square Enix takes $140 million hit in content abandonment losses as it revises the game pipeline. Yeah, they really need to think about it because their games are not that great. They said they released a major title, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, in February, but has yet to announce the sales figures. I've heard it's not that great because it was a PlayStation exclusive. People said the game is actually very good, but it was a PlayStation exclusive. Analysts suggested it struggled. A topic IGN investigated. Other games released in the current financial year include Final Fantasy XVI, which was another meh title from what I understand sales-wise. Final Fantasy Pixel Remaster, again, older Final Fantasy games for the 50th time. And the Splatoon-style game Foam Stars. I haven't even heard of Foam Stars. Dawn Trail for Final Fantasy XIV, which has been around forever, launches in the next financial year in late June. They also have Kingdom Hearts 4 someday, the third game in the Final Fantasy Remake trilogy, and Dragon Quest XII. In January, the producer Yoshida of Final Fantasy XVI said it might be time for a younger generation to lead the franchise and helm Final Fantasy XVII. I would argue we need to get the old crew back together and create an old school style Final Fantasy, because I think it would sell like hotcakes. I really do. I think people want a simpler time. They want those kinds of games again. And, you know, going back to the other video we did talking about Gen Z and millennials wanting older titles, and the fact that Square keeps releasing older titles, just give us games like you used to make. We had like 6 amazing JRPGs in a year, if I remember correctly, in 2000. That was a hell of a year. Like, and they were just firing on all cylinders. But leading up to that, they were doing really well too. From like, you know, 96, 97, through those first couple of years of the PS1, God, there were so many good role-playing games. And they did it better than anybody else. And here we are, guys. Like, what the hell happened? How did you fall off? Just go back to being Squaresoft. Go back to what works. That's all you gotta do. That's all you gotta do. And you'll make money. Gonna wrap it up. Please subscribe. We'll talk later.